Welcome to the January 15th installment of Reading Through the Bible Chronologically. We got to read yesterday a little bit more about Joseph, and I hope you saw what I was talking about yesterday, that I just think Joseph was amazing. So I'm hoping that you agreed with me as you read about him. We start off our reading in Genesis 40. We did Genesis 40 and 41. The beginning of Genesis 40, Joseph is still in prison, unfortunately, but God is still with him, and he has been put in charge again, just like he was in Potiphar's house. And so we see God growing his leadership skills in these unlikely places. I'm sure he would have much rather been leading somewhere else, but this is where God chose to really grow his leadership skills. We don't know why, but we do know that he learned so much there for where he would end up later. While he's there, he's put in charge of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, who had really upset the Pharaoh somehow, and Pharaoh chucked him in prison. And at some point in their stay there, they had these dreams. And this is where we see Joseph starting to interpret other people's dreams. I think it's really cool that God spoke to Joseph through dreams and gave him the ability to interpret dreams. I think that's cool. I would love for God to speak to me in a dream. I think that, or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would freak out. I don't know. But I think it's cool. So they have these dreams, and Joseph enters in and says, you look upset, basically. You look upset, what's wrong? And I love that part about Joseph, because he doesn't just pass by the hurting or the confused. He steps in and he enters in and says, what's going on? And from this encounter comes his deliverance from prison later. And he gets to help these guys out. He helps them understand their dreams. But he also starts the ball rolling of him getting out of prison later. So it's important that he indeed did enter in. So he tells them what their dreams are about. The baker's, his wasn't so great, but the cupbearer's was great. And he said, you'll be out of here and restored to your position in 3 days. And boom, that happened. The baker's happened just like Joseph said it would. But then Joseph tries to speed up God's timing and says to the cupbearer, hey, remember me to the Pharaoh. And the cupbearer doesn't, of course. And so, people can be super disappointing because we're all just people. We're going to let people down, and people are going to let us down. But the cool thing is that God sees. He's not taken by surprise. And he has Joseph get out of prison in his timing. Joseph was trying to hurry up, which of course, who wouldn't? But God had something more for him in that prison before he released him. Quickly after this, we see that Isaac dies, which is Joseph's grandfather, Jacob's dad. We don't get many details on that. And then we see that the Pharaoh has a dream. This is the third dream that we're seeing Joseph interpret. Pharaoh has this dream, and the cupbearer goes, oh yeah, I remember this dude in prison, and they pull him out, clean him up, and he interprets the dream for Pharaoh. And so it's this cool thing of God has this plan, and he reveals it before he does it, which I think, that's kind of cool. I like that God does that. I feel like he does that with us as well. Like, this is where we're going. Let's prepare and get ready. So this was a moment in time that was set up 2 years earlier when Joseph had met the cupbearer and interpreted his dream. God set this up 2 years earlier. Isn't that cool? And so, God had him waiting, and God is in the waiting. He needed to stay for some reason. And the cool thing is that also that God, from here, Joseph steps into position over all of Egypt. And because the Pharaoh is so impressed with him, and God gave him everything he needed to get to that point. He had leadership skills. He was able to interpret dreams so he could get in front of the Pharaoh, and then gave him the ability to know what to do in this famine. And so he was put in charge of all of Egypt. And so God had this big job for him, but he had him going down this kind of weird path to equip him and get him ready. So in those moments when we're looking around going, what am I doing here? I don't even understand. It's part of the process. Trust the Lord. And I'm just impressed with Joseph's level of trust in prison. And to the Pharaoh, he says, I can't interpret dreams, but God can. And then Pharaoh mentions the Spirit of God being in Joseph, which Pharaohs considered themselves gods. So for him to see such a display of God's power, for him to then go, the Spirit of God is in you, to concede that there might be another God, I think is a huge deal and just shows how big God showed off. And so that is the end of our reading today. I just think Joseph's level of trust and faith and patience in God is admirable. All right, so tomorrow is Genesis 45 through 47:27. All right, I will talk to y'all tomorrow. Bye-bye.